everybody. Welcome to the first day of the rest of your life. My name is Mike Zaremba, and I am the co-host of Vancouver Real Podcast. And joining me behind the helm is my brother Andy,
the other co-host, who doesn't have a camera today, but that's okay.
Hey, your voice is so beautiful and powerful. You don't even need
I have a voice
camera.
made for radio, or maybe not, or maybe a face for radio. That's how it goes.
Yeah, you got a great face.
Oh, thanks, man. I appreciate that.
We're just down a camera right now. We need Omid to come. Omid, if you're listening to this, come back to Vancouver.
He
and
actually
help
might
us
listen
tweak
to
up our
this.
system. I know he probably will.
He probably
Omid,
will.
this is your call to come and help us out. Because we need a camera going. But it's because we have two guests today, which we'll get into in just a moment. But as per usual, we are podcasting here out of Floathouse in downtown Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada, at 70 West Cordova Street. This is our Gastown location. Floathouse.ca is our website. And we want to invite everybody, if you haven't even heard of flotation therapy, or floating as we generically call it, go to YouTube after this interview, which you might be on right now anyways, and just punch in what is floating. And there's a great 6.5 minute quick synopsis video of what flotation therapy is that we created. It's the top hit. You can't miss it. And yeah, that way you can kind of piece this together and explore it, because there's actually probably a lot of people who will be listening to this who would be open to exploring altered states of consciousness inside a flotation tank. Mm-hmm. So if that rings a bell for you or intrigues you at all, definitely check it out. And if you want to try it, use the promo code VancouverReal and you'll save 20% on that single flip.
Yeah, it's definitely a very effective way to generate an altered state of consciousness completely naturally, which is really nice. Sometimes do it on your own. Of course, you can do that in other ways, through like music festivals or meditation or whatever. There's many ways to do it. Mm-hmm. But the float tank is one that I find really just dials in, because there's nothing else going on in there other than what's going on for you. So you
human
can't
medicine.
So if you're complaining about things in a float tank and you're like, I don't know, and you're upset about something, it's all coming from you. You really can't blame anything on that. So
that's right.
It's a great place for introspection, which is one of the reasons I use it anyways.
Cool.
Yeah, but also keep your eye open for Mindful Mass. Oh, thanks, Mike. That's great. Mindful Mass is the meditation group that myself and Carolyn and Budgel run, along with Chad Weir. And we're going to be doing probably an event in October. It's not official yet, but if you'd like to join the Mindful Mass community page, it's on Facebook. It's Mindful Mass / Meditation Mob on Facebook. So if you type in that combination of words, you should be able to find it if you're living in Vancouver, and you probably have some mutual friends that are part of the group already. So keep an eye out for that. And of course, we'll be running a few Man Talks events this fall. I have one coming on September 10th, which won't obviously be relevant for this podcast, but the next one will be October 22nd, called The Power of Trust. We have 3 really high caliber speakers coming on to talk about trust and how powerful that can be. Mm-hmm. And also Vancouver Real Community. We have a Vancouver Real Community page. You can find that on Facebook, or connect to all of that through vancouverreal.tv. Or you can connect to it through andyzaremba.com. In fact, if you're interested in becoming a guest on Vancouver Real, I actually have a link through my website where you can fill out a form, and I'll get that form emailed to me directly. And if you have something you want to share and get a message out, you can do that through andyzaremba.com.
Beautiful.
And that's it.
Okay, as I spin the camera back to me, and let's dive into our episode today. So I'm really honored, to be honest with you, to have you both back, Salimeh back on the show, and Trevor for the first time. So to join us to talk about initially the Cannabis Hemp Conference, which is happening in September. We have returning guest, Salimeh Tabrizi. So welcome back, Salimeh.
Thank you. And
joining her this year is Trevor Millar, who I've recently gotten to know this past 6 to 8 months, I suppose, as I've been appointed as part of the board of directors for MAPS Canada, and you were as well, but have recently stepped into the leadership role of the chair of the board of MAPS Canada. So congratulations on that, and welcome to Vancouver Real.
Thank you very much. It's
awesome.
An honor as well.
And Trevor, you're also the owner and facilitator for Liberty Root, which is a Ibogaine healing center, primarily probably towards addictions and that nature, but something you've been doing for how long now?
I've had Liberty Root for about 5 years. The last year we haven't been completely operational because of some regulatory changes that have happened in Canada,
Gotcha.
which are good. I think ultimately we can get into that a bit later.
Yeah.
But we over the course of the 4 years we were operational, we brought about 200 people in for 10 days at a time, mostly opioid addicts, and have a very high success rate treating hardcore opiate addiction with Ibogaine.
Very cool.
At least a 50% success rate. I think it's actually quite a bit more.
Wow.
But in the face of this opioid crisis, that's a very compelling statistic.
100%. That's really, really cool. I mean, it's incredible. And so, yeah, we touched base with you guys not too long ago, maybe a week or two ago, to kind of get this podcast in gear because, Salimeh, you are the main lead for the Cannabis Hemp Conference.com this year. So welcome back. And can you maybe just give us an introduction to what this conference is all about, and we'll go from there.
Nice. Thank you. Thanks so much for having me back.
You're welcome.
I love what you guys are doing, and it's always nice to connect
Absolutely.
to you both.
Definitely.
So the conference this year is going into its 4th year, and as maybe some of the viewers remember from last year, I shared that this conference is an ayahuasca-inspired conference. It's an ayahuasca-inspired cannabis conference, which is really amazing for bringing these two incredible plant teachers and plant medicines together. And the whole reason why this conference even came to be is that, 4 years ago, I was assisting in ayahuasca ceremonies, and during that time, I was deeply, deeply in my work, personally, but also assisting with others. And it was through a cannabis meditation that this whole vision of the conference came to be. And so at that time, I had a meditation with cannabis, and she came through, and I've shared this story before, but I think it's a powerful one to know what the inspiration is. She came through as a feminine energy, and many of us have connected to the medicine in this kind of feminine force.
Definitely, yeah.
And she was furious, just incredibly furious, and she said that she was tired of being abused, misused, misunderstood, and to the extent of being prostituted. And what she wants is reverence and respect. And so from that point on, me and my fellow hypnotherapist friend, we went into another trance state, and we connected with the medicine again. And the second time, there were 3 rounds. The second time, the medicine said, "Dirty, dirty man." And so my friend was startled because, as many of us who've worked with plant medicines know, that when we connect with the divine or the goddess or God or God consciousness in that way, it's a pretty powerful experience. We're really deeply humbled. And so he was a bit upset that he maybe didn't have the best relationship, the healthiest relationship with cannabis. And I know many of our guys, many women also have this relationship with cannabis that, they're trying to heal and work through. So he said, "I don't want to go back in. I don't want to go back into trance." And I said, "Let's go back in one more time." And so we went back into trance, and this time the medicine was kind of like a witch on a cauldron, and she said, "Dirty, dirty mankind." And so this year, the 3 pillars of the conference are not only science, but spirituality, which is so important for us to connect back to our souls, as well as ecology. So making sure that the question is, what is being called of us at this time? Why are so many of us being activated by the medicines, whether it's ayahuasca, iboga, Santa Maria cannabis, psilocybin, the mushrooms are doing a lot of great work right now. And so what is being called of us in this kind of way? And so the conference, again, just a little bit of the details. It's a 2-day conference at the Chan Center, and we're moving into a really reverent venue. And the Chan Center is just a very, very sacred stage where the Dalai Lama has spoken on.
It's a beautiful facility.
Beautiful facility where the cannabis is coming out from the trenches, from the basements to the convention centers where it's still cement, to this glorious new light and stage.
That's where it probably belongs, right? Who are some of the speakers?
Yeah, so the 2-day conference is going to have over 40 speakers. And so these are the international, national experts of the cannabis scene. And it's so exciting because Canada is going into legalization 2 weeks after the conference.
Right. It's huge. Yeah.
So it's a time of celebration.
A little bit closer, sorry.
Thank you.
Okay, you're good.
Thank you.
Yeah.
It's a time of celebration. So over 40 speakers on the 2 days.
Yeah.
Then on Sunday, so Friday and Saturdays at the Chan Center. And on Sunday, we're going to go into the Nest, which is a beautiful LEED certified building on UBC again.
It's a great space too.
Great space, and 6 workshops will happen there.
Cool.
And the last part of the conference, which is very exciting, is the first ever public cannabis meditation at the Museum of Anthropology on Saturday night.
That would be worth going to.
That sounds incredible.
I want to just jump in and comment on a couple of little things there. And people might ask, like, why should somebody like worry about the relationship with cannabis, like a plant medicine? But it completely is that. And after some of my past experiences over the past few years with ayahuasca, I've really worked on changing my relationship, especially with cannabis, and especially this time around. And I really am trying to use it for, again, with intention, under a ceremonial type of setting. And I find doing it that way is so much more beneficial than using it casually. I'm actually trying to eliminate all recreational use of it. And I'm not condemning anyone who does that, but for me personally, I'm trying to use it in just that manner. And it's amazing when I actually did a 420 meditation with a guy. Shout out to Terry, 420 meditation on Instagram, and he's facilitated it. And I got to say, like, I sat for about 90 minutes with cannabis, and it was incredible. And it's so incredible when you use it with intention, like you were saying. So I think it's so great that you're bringing that sort of awareness to a really healthy use of it, as opposed to just like getting high and eating Fruit Loops or something.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. The evolution of this medicine is so much connected to our own evolution and our own consciousness expansion. So the more that we can come into terms with that, like what you just said, I think we just have a better relationship with ourselves ultimately.
Totally. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's really cool because I just got a nice voicemail when I returned back from my trip last week from Stephen Gray, who has been on the show and runs and organizes the Spirit Plant Medicine Conference at UBC later. I think it's early November this year, and he's probably going to be coming on the podcast again to talk about that event this year. And he also wrote a book called Cannabis and Spirituality that was, I think, published and released last year. And he just told me in the voicemail that it's been moving really, really well. So I believe there's this reconciliation process happening, this reconnection process that you obviously have gotten into through channeling this conference, the inspiration behind this conference that is it seems to be universal to a degree. It's touching a lot of different people in a lot of different ways, and it's overlapping with obviously the other plant medicines, and we're seeing cannabis what it truly has always been, but now we actually start to see it. You know what I mean? So,
do you think with the way like the legislation has gone and legalization that it might lead to like increased recreational use instead of like a more of a sacred use potentially?
Yeah. So, cannabis has many different crossroads. One area is definitely for individuals who are suffering from major issues, like from cancer. We know the rates right now, half of the men and a third of the women will experience cancer in their lifetime. So cancer is a big part. Then there's the chronic illnesses and the chronic pain. There's inflammation, there's epilepsy with the children. So there's the individuals with major...
The medical uses.
Uses. And then there's the people who are connected to the plant medicines on a larger scale. And so for them, I don't say it's legalization, I say it's liberation. So let's really be clear about what is going on with humans' unconsciousness. Then on the third side is people who love the high and love the recreational part of it and want to be happy and just want to chill. And so there's no judgment. This medicine is open to all, and I think that's why it's such a wonderful plant. So to answer your question, I think legalization is going to bring about whatever is needed for every single person. And it's not a perfect state right now. From going and growing the plant in basement cases, I've visited several different growing operations, and it's not the best sites. And then we move into mass production where the plant is then put into psych ward rooms of white, very sterile environments and not connected to the earth. And so we have to somehow come to terms with this balance and whether we can get into outdoor growing and actually have sun and then bringing in closed loop systems, bringing in, healthy soil, making sure that we're not using pesticides on the plants, but rather creating healthy environments for the soil. So the
permaculture style.
Permaculture, and making sure that the plant really has the resilience that it always had, instead of us trying to
maximize THC potency.
Yeah.
Basically.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, it would be. I mean, I'm just blurting out loud now, but it'd be cool to experience a non-altered form of cannabis, which might. I mean, I'm sure there's species many different species of it, and to actually experience just the natural plant unaltered, growing in an optimal environment outdoors in that kind of natural setting. I think that'd be. I mean, I'm just curious from an experience.
I wonder if it's even possible anymore.
Right. Well, that's true. I mean, if someone could find, I mean, I bet you it is. I bet you it is possible, and that would be a really, I mean, just as an avenue of this liberation that we're going to have, would be someone to explore that. It'd be like, man, that'd be a really cool idea.
I think it's really important what Salimeh's done with the conference to make sure that we do talk about all sides of this, make sure that we do talk about the balance, because I've been using cannabis on and off for 20 or more years now. And for me, it's the reason why I've been in the addiction business now for a long time, but cannabis is the reason I personally understand addiction. Like Gabor Mate will talk about addiction being something that is detrimental to your life, but you can't stop it.
Correct.
And in my early 20s, I saw that I had all these dreams and all these passions that I wanted to fulfill, but I was hitting that bong again, and couldn't get, and then, and you can hit the bong and get great ideas, but it's not great at getting you to put those ideas into action, Not
necessarily.
It gives you a lot of insight, but not necessarily the will to move forward.
Well, and it also gives you a false sense. I mean, again, you can't generalize, but it can sometimes give you a false sense of like that you actually are doing something,
right?
When you're really not doing anything, despite the great ideas you have, and it becomes like this block, and that's it comes back to that relationship. Like, what is the relationship between you and this plant teacher? And that's something that cannabis has been, despite the prohibition of it, has still proliferated tremendously. Let's just speak to North America alone. Like, more people are smoking cannabis now or ingesting cannabis than ever before, despite prohibition. Yet, what is this relationship? So I really love the notion of this conference and the Spirit Plant Medicine Conference is they really approach that element of it, of like, what is your relationship with cannabis and these other plant teachers? How do you use them? Why do you use them? And just like turning that mirror on yourself a little bit. So ask yourself these questions and explore it together as a community. Like, I love that angle that you guys are leading with this. I think it's so important.
I think just acknowledging that it's a bit of a double-edged sword, as anything in 100%. Life is, because at the same time, cannabis has been, like, I remember being at the Plant Spirit Medicine Conference a few years ago, and it was the gentleman spoke. He's featured in Stephen's book, but he'd been to India and spoke. Do you know who I'm speaking about?
The historical spiritual part?
Yeah.
Chris Bennett, are you thinking?
No, not Chris Bennett.
Sachin?
It's Sachin. Yeah.
Shout out to Satyan.
Yeah, I heard
He'll be
him.
speaking at Man Talks on October 22nd.
Nice. I heard him speak, and that was the first time I'd heard somebody speak about cannabis and spirituality that passionately. And I'm like, oh my God, this guy's just validated my whole spiritual path, because at the same time, I'm guilt-ridden about the insights that I've gotten with this plant because the war on drugs has been so effective and I've been so propagandized. That's the other thing is, we need to be able to have these conversations about what these medicines have done for us without that shroud of guilt over top of us.
So funny you say that, because I had the same experience. You know who was my Satchen? Was Joe Rogan. He made me feel less guilty about using cannabis. When I was using it before I heard him speak of it, I was just like, I felt guilty about it. Like
you're doing something wrong.
Complex there, right? But then he was just like, this isn't bad. This is, and he went on his big rants about it. And I'm like, oh, wow. And it really helped. It really shifted me a little bit. I mean, granted, I still had a lot of room to grow, and I still am on that path of growth with cannabis. Like, personally, I haven't worked with cannabis for almost 2 years now, primarily because of my work with ayahuasca, and just I had to reevaluate my relationship. But it's been of late that I've been opening up towards it again, but I'm doing so very well, just cautiously, one step at a time for myself, not because I think anything bad's going to happen. I just want to make sure I approach this as purely as I can and what that looks like, and I'm not rushing and jumping into it. You know?
And I would say that, this is a big part of our transition during this time, where we're each just taking responsibility, like self-responsibility, and I think self-inquiry are the two pieces right now, because no matter how many times we revisit these plants, if we're not doing the work in between, and you were mentioning that before we jumped on the call, on the talk, but integration, like I remember when I went to Peru, the medicines, like ayahuasca said, I'm being wasted. The medicine is being wasted because humans are only going back into those states instead of actually taking the golden nuggets of what it is that we actually have to do in our day-to-day life, right? Like you said, you could hit the medicine and then afterwards not have any kind of intention or will to move forward in your life. And so I think the medicines remind us of presence, they remind us of breath, they remind us of regulating our own systems. But if we don't do that on our own, we're just circling in a canoe.
It's totally true. You have to do the work. You have to do the integration. I think that's key with any sort of medicine experience. Is I actually got hammered pretty good because I went back before integrating a pretty obvious lesson. I went back to Peru and I had a pretty rough time, actually, to the point where I thought I should never do it again. But then coming back this time and actually doing the work, like in that 6-month span before going back again, I really put the effort in doing work. Like I got the message and it was amazing because it was like, she rewarded me instead. It's like, you've done it. Great. Now here's some more for you. I'm like, thank you, but it can really like, and I'm sure with Iboga, it's a similar story. I don't really know much about Iboga at all, but like I've heard it can be really tough.
It can be a tough experience. It's very tough physically. Like it's a 36-hour long trip that you go on and you're not sleeping for that 36-hour stretch, even though near the end of it, you might be more tired than you ever have been in your whole life.
And
but
you can't sleep?
You can't sleep at all. I always warn my clients, the worst part of Iboga and Ibogaine is that near the end of it, you're going to be super tired, but you're not going to be able to sleep. So don't even try. I'm trying to, if you kind of prepare yourself mentally, you don't have to suffer through that. You can just be with it.
Accept it.
Right? But that period, that 24 hours where you're sitting there, you don't want to move, you're lying in bed, you're thinking about what's just happened to you, it seems to facilitate a bit of an integration. I would say that there's something about Ibogaine that means it has some kind of a built-in integration with it. Like it's so powerful that it can help people stop heroin addiction, when nothing else can. So it might have something to do with once the Ibogaine is taken in, it metabolizes into noribogaine, which then is stored in your fat cells for, they say, up to 3 months and will be slowly released. So you're almost on a bit of a pink cloud. And still, while I say there's a built-in integration component, I also tell my clients to do all they can and help them in every way possible in order to integrate it. So, essentially you're going to be given a 3-month window where you're going to feel like $1 million. Make sure you do the work in the meantime to make sure you've got an inspiring life and don't just want to go back to dope after.
Can you maybe, for people who might not know so much about Ibogaine, give people like a little bit of a synopsis of what it is and what it's all about?
For sure. So it's from the Iboga shrub, which is from West Africa, Gabon and Cameroon. It's been used a lot ceremonially for centuries. The Bwiti tradition has grown out of the use of this medicine. And, in the jungle, they'll use it for initiation, they'll use it for healing, they'll use it for all the things that medicine is used for. And then in 1962, a heroin addict by the name of Howard Lotzoff was in New York City, and his chemist buddy knew that he would try anything. And he said, "Here, try this Ibogaine." So he tried this Ibogaine, and I guess he was on his way to his psychologist's couch when he took it, and he spent the next day or so on that psychologist's couch, going through this crazy trip he wasn't really expecting, but he came out the other end and he's like, wait a second, I haven't wanted heroin the whole time I've been on this, nor do I want it now. So that's when its anti-addictive properties were discovered. And thankfully, Howard was an industrious kind of guy who then ran with this and knocked on every door he could get somebody to listen to him to try and tout the benefits of this substance. And, you know, that was, like I said, 1962. A lot has happened since then. He formed the Global Ibogaine Therapy Alliance, which came out with some standards of care. I was actually the executive director of GITA, is the short form, recently. And now there are lots of Ibogaine providers in Mexico, for example. It is outlawed in the States. It's Schedule 1 in the States. In Canada, up until May of last year, it was listed as a natural health product. And so it was available within Canada. It wasn't illegal to have, but adverse events happen with Ibogaine. It is potentially dangerous. So it's hard on the heart, potentially. There are ways around that. There are ways of working safely with it. But Health Canada looked at it and they had a decision to make. They could either outlaw it, which thankfully they didn't. Instead, they put it on the prescription drug list because they saw that there is some potential benefit. They'd been in contact with me over 4 years and we had a great relationship, actually. But putting it on the prescription drug list doesn't mean it's immediately available as a prescription. It still needs to go through phase 1, 2, and 3 clinical trials.
Wow.
And thankfully, now that we are working with MAPS, Rick Doblin with MAPS in the States wants to do a phase 1/phase 2 clinical trial with Ibogaine. We need $2 million to make that happen. So I'm glad that there is that path. And on a parallel path, I'm working through something called the Special Access Drug Program, which is something that Health Canada has to make medicines available that are kind of in that gray area that Ibogaine's currently in, where the Special Access Drug Program is for people who have tried everything else to beat their terminal illness, and it's a life or death situation. And that's the two of them. They need to have tried everything else, and it needs to be a life or death situation. So I hope to have this application in next week, actually, and we should know fairly quickly. But arguably, anybody who's an opiate addict is in a life or death situation, right. And nobody's calling the Ibogaine guy because they haven't tried other ways to quit, first of all. So right. Hopefully I can get that approval. If so, then hopefully precedent set and we can give Ibogaine to people in Canada again.
Wow. Can you speak a little bit on how Ibogaine actually works with people with really hard addictions like that?
There hasn't been enough studying on the kind of chemical interactions, but it is a visionary plant medicine. So people that I've given medicine to have kind of been shown on that cellular level what's happening. And it seems as though the opiate receptor, so when you're addicted to opioids, we all have painkillers that are pumping through our bodies right now. Those endorphins are keeping, gravity would be painful if we didn't have those endorphins working right now to stop that from happening. Once you've been addicted to opioids for, 2 or 3, or once you've been using them for 2, 3, 4 weeks consistently, that system within yourself shuts down. So that's why those dire withdrawals happen. So people, they don't get their opioid, just the pain of existence hurts from then on. So what Ibogaine seems to do is we wait until a person, our whole process is we bring people in for 10 days. We had a doctor that worked with us to prescribe morphine, so we can keep them on oral morphine for as long as we need to. So we don't have to rush into giving them any Ibogaine, nor will they go into withdrawals. So we'll keep them on morphine for a day or so. Then we start working with small amounts of Ibogaine. So we wait until they're in a bit of withdrawal. And when they're in a bit of withdrawal, that means that those opioid receptors are screaming for an opioid at that point, or at least starting to cry a little for an opioid. So that means that there's no opioid on that receptor. So when the Ibogaine goes in, it seems to work on those opioid receptor and cleanses it somehow and puts it back to an opioid naive state. So we do 2 days of low dosing with the medicine, which allows us to wean them off that opiate as much as possible before the next day, which is when we bring in the registered nurse and do the full flood dose, it's called. So that's kind of the full 36-hour-long Ibogaine experience, after which generally there's no withdrawals. We might do some small booster doses out the other end, but that's the big thing. Ibogaine seems to work well for interrupting all addictions. Most psychedelic psychotherapy seems to work very well for interrupting addiction. Psilocybin for nicotine, the Johns Hopkins guys are doing. And for cocaine addiction, I met somebody last
alcoholism.
week. Ayahuasca. Ayahuasca is actually how I stopped smoking cannabis. That's kind of interrupted it for me. Now I can kind of take it or leave it. But so we'll do so. But Ibogaine really hits those opioid receptors, and where it works great for all addictions, it works really well for opioid addiction.
Wow.
Yeah.
And maybe I'll add to this as well. So Trevor will elaborate on this and talk more at the Cannabis Hemp Conference.
Awesome.
He'll be one of the speakers on the Iboga and ayahuasca panel. So
Amazing.
one other piece is that the conference this year is expanding to include the other plant medicines. So fungi medicine as well. So psilocybin, there'll be a panel on microdosing, as well as LSD, DMT, and MDMA, so all the recent studies on therapeutic treatments. But what I want to say about Iboga, because I just recently had my first experience with Iboga in a microdose form, but what I learned is that ayahuasca actually works a lot on the serotonin receptors, San Pedro works on the dopamine receptors, but Iboga actually works on all of the neurotransmitter receptors, and that's why it's such a potent, powerful medicine. And I want to bring it back to cannabis as well, because cannabis is so much on the endocannabinoid system that we have. That's very much, many people don't even know about this. Many of our doctors don't know that this system is in our bodies and regulates our mood, appetite, sleep, stress regulation, pain. And so it also is very synergetic with the serotonin receptors, and so THC and serotonin as well as CBD. And so it's amazing that we're just at the tip of the knowledge of what these incredible plant teachers and plant medicines can do for our system. And I want to loop it back again to breath, because what is allowing the serotonin and dopamine to actually be increased within our body is our breath, is the oxygen in our bodies, and that connection that we have to plants. Because one of my friends was saying the other day, she's like, Salimeh, when we breathe in and then we exhale, the plants breathe in and then they exhale. And so we breathe in this circular motion with them. And because I feel like we've lost our breath, we've lost our connection to our planet. Because when was the last time you went to a plant and said, thank you so much for breathing with me?
From time to time.
Not entirely under.
Now they mention it, it's been a couple months.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, but I get some plants at home. I need to have a talk with, it's okay. I'm just curious. I wanted to know, why do you, other than say maybe some of the scientific reasons behind it, why are these plants so effective at treating different forms of addiction? Like, because I know in my own experience, it reveals a lot of things to myself. But maybe you could speak on, or both you could speak on, like, is it like almost like a shock therapy in a sense? Like, here you need to take a look at this aspect of your life, and it draws attention to things, or it shows you like horrible outcomes. Like, what is it, the common experience which gets people to really make big changes in their lives after medicine experiences?
Yeah, there's a metaphor I always use, which is, it's as we're living life, it's as if while we're living life, we see life through a pane of glass. And as we live life, traumas happen, things happen, and this pane of glass gets dirty. And it gets so dirty that we don't even notice that it's dirty anymore. And the thing that I've really found with psychedelic psychotherapy is it doesn't really seem to add anything to you. It doesn't bring you some great package of information and say, here, this is what you've got to do. For me, it really seems as though it's just cleaning that glass from the inside out. And as it cleans that glass, then it allows you to be a better functioning human being. You're less dragged down by things. And that's just one metaphor, but it seems to really be a pattern interrupter. If there are things in your life that you want to overcome, it interrupts that pattern. And that pattern may get interrupted by you reliving a past trauma from a third person perspective and say, oh, you know what? I see Mom was really having a bad day that day, or actually she was having a bad week. Now I understand why that happened. And then that allows somebody to forgive that situation. And that's the other thing, is I really think these are forgiveness medicines. They help you
Right.
eliminate the things that are no longer serving you.
And that's what's really the MAPS research with MDMA. That's what they're really focusing on with PTSD and treatment-resistant depression. It's just so interesting because it is sometimes those big experiences which are extremely uncomfortable at the time to live through. And it's funny with ayahuasca too. It's like that clearing of the glass comes in a very interesting form, which is typically a purge. Yeah. And it's funny how it's like when you're reliving one of those past memories or some big emotion is coming up, how quickly the purge reacts to that. And you might have some sort of a negative thought maybe, and then all of a sudden it's like you purge immediately.
So
it's like
yeah.
Maybe it's you're a signal to not be thinking that, or it's actually clearing that out of you in some way. And that's the one thing that's been super common in my experiences is just that it just feels like it's going into like the deepest crevices and crooks of my entire being essentially, and pulling stuff out and being like, all right, we don't need this anymore. This is coming out. Oh, well, look what we found here. This needs to come out now. And I feel like you just clear the slate. Like you notice, even when like, you commented Mike recently came back, because when people recently come back from these experiences, it's amazing because it's amazing. I notice when I go to the airport and I'll be going through the airport, and all the airport staff and security and the check-in people are all really nice to me. And it's like people just start attracting to me and want to have conversations, and they just want to be. It's weird. I don't know how to explain it, but that's what it seems like. Anyways, this is again that clearing of all the garbage, really.
I think once you've cleared like that, I think all of us have a very attractive light within us.
Yeah.
That
our vibration.
Yeah.
I'll bring it to the realm of vibration as well. The advancements of the plant medicines, which are such important tools, are kind of coinciding with the quantum physics and quantum mechanics that we're tapping into. And so if everything is vibration, we know that, then whenever there's blocks in that vibration, then disease happens. And really disease, I see it as resistance to what we ultimately are, which is light, which we ultimately are, which is love. And so when we are not connected to that internal source of love and light, which happens when we have beliefs or fear or anger or we've had trauma, then those blocks create energetic stagnation within our system. And so what the plants do, because it's kind of scary sometimes going into those blocks, right? It's like, okay, I got to go face that trauma I had when I was 5, or I got to face, Trevor was saying, I've got to go forgive someone who's done something to me. And when we actually have the safe container of self-love and self-compassion, which is what the plants and fungi create for us, then you can sigh and be able to move through it. Because sometimes in meditation, my master's research was in meditation, and a lot of times I thought, wow, the Buddhist and Hindu traditions were amazing because they had community built around meditation. But in the West, we have to sit and then be like open to all of our anxiety and depression coming through in meditation. And so bless people who can sit there and really face themselves in self-compassion and self-inquiry. But when that's not the case, then the plant medicines come and hold that space for us. So we feel it, and then we can let go and let go and let go. And then after a while, the momentum takes place, and then it's joy. And then we know that we're master creators from the space of joy. There's no creation when you're in depression. You're just going to create more depression. But when you're in joy, synchronicity starts to happen, magic starts to happen. You get your calling, you get your mission. What is your soul mission at this time? That's what I always ask people and friends.
It's that my business started because I wanted to help the downtown east side, actually, this neighborhood here. So in 2001, I started looking at different ways that I might be able to help the downtown east side, and just plugged away at that, made a lot of contacts, built some networks. In 2005, really dug into it again, and even moved into the corner of Hastings in Maine for a month, which was a bad idea. But Liberty Root was then formed. Ibogaine came on the radar as a way to potentially help. And so once we had an operational and profitable business, I looked at how we might help the downtown east side. So VanDu, the Vancouver area network of drug users, was very open to hearing from me early in the game. So I went back to them and said, look, I'd like to ideally give some people from the neighborhood some Iboga. And I don't want to just give them the medicine and throw them back into the downtown east side, which wouldn't be good for integration at all. So what I did is I worked with a group of people. We met once a week for 3 months leading up to the potential to do medicine. And we started with about 15 people coming every day, down to about 5 every day. And then at the end, there was just one guy left that was qualified. He still wanted to. We brought him in. He did medicine. It went great. We brought him in for 7 days. He's an excellent guy. He's going to speak at the conference, I think. He was just in the hospital. That's why he hasn't been in touch with you yet. But he moved back to the downtown east side. Unfortunately, the housing arrangement that we were moving towards fell through. So he was back in a shelter fairly quickly. He ended up relapsing. He kept working on himself, though, and then we did eventually bring him back in for another 10 days. And now he's at the point, and your story kind of inspired me telling this story, because he is now almost 2 years clean. He's got a job. He loves life. He's got a great apartment. And he just did a 10-day Vipassana retreat. Wow. So, I said to him, should we maybe have done that meditation first before all this plant medicine? And he's like, there's no way. There's no way I would have been able to do a 10-day silent Vipassana retreat before we did all this plant medicine.
It would be really challenging. It could be really challenging.
Super interesting. Sorry, like this pioneering effort that you've done there. One, it's incredible work. Like it really takes someone very dedicated and passionate with a huge heart to do that. So, I mean, amazing work. And what you kind of have done there is trudged through what obviously reveals so many different systemic issues, right? Like really, which is so necessary to uncover and to go intimately into for us, because, yes, there's the work of the plant medicines, but then again, what are we doing after the ceremony? How are we integrating this into our lives, into our culture, into our society, into our systemic issues? And like that's going to be a process. And I see, again, the work both of you do. And I guess I want to, I guess I understand the relationship for your role, Trevor, with the Cannabis Conference as a speaker and panelist and all that. But just this type of approach to it, how important it is to help make these bigger systemic changes in the future. Like that's, it starts with the individual kind of, and then we'll hopefully ring out from there as we all start to work together.
The other,
in that process.
Obviously the big, in my 15 years of researching how to help the downtown east side, poverty is also obviously a massive issue. Yeah. So another thing that Aaron really latched onto when we worked together is he read every book I recommended. So I recommend books like Think and Grow Rich and The Science of Getting Rich, which to me are spiritual texts. In this anti-capitalist society, nobody likes the word rich, but it could be the science of getting whatever you want out of life, Right. So he ran with things like that as well and really did what he could to change his mindset and integrate new ideas. And that's what I say to especially the opioid addicts that we bring in, is I'm going to give you, first of all, how much have you been thinking about heroin for the last 5 years? Probably 80 to 90% of your mental energy has been spent thinking about heroin. Now I'm going to take that away. What are we going to replace that with? Right. So I work with people beforehand to try and get some empowering habits. Like the force that is habit, which can destroy a life, bad habits can destroy a life, is the exact same force that is, if used constructively, can create a beautiful life. So Aaron, it called me, you can see him on my website as well, libertyroot.net, his story is there. But he called me a couple of months ago and he's got $5,000 that he wants to invest into something. He was asking about crypto. I think he put it into cannabis stocks, actually.
That's
large portion of it.
Wow.
So, not only...
So he's turning his life around.
Yeah,
completely.
He's turned his life around. He's considered something called an abundance mindset. And how can I think in a more empowered way so that, whether the systems suck or not, I'm going to move my life forward.
Yeah, that's getting out of the sort of that victim mindset, victim mentality, which is so common these days. Really, one thing I would say though is like meditation, or what we do in the float tank as well, is amazing for integration after medicine experiences.
We've done that with many of our clients.
It's amazing because it is so quiet and so still. Like so much stuff will come back, and a lot of times with these big experiences, I find that it's difficult to recall everything that happens, but you'll be sitting really quiet, or you'll be in the tank floating, and these things will just come up, and like there'll be little reminders being, oh, remember this lesson? Do you remember to do this? Are you working on your homework? You know, and I find getting really quiet is a great way to do that. So it's like, and I was actually curious as to what are some other, we can all agree that after any of these experiences that integration is super important. What are some other tools that you guys have used in the past to help with that?
Right. So let me just touch base on the wealth consciousness that Trevor and prosperity consciousness that he touched upon before I answer your question in regards to integration tools. So I feel this is a really big part of the movement as well, kind of what you were saying, Mike, regarding the systemic changes that we are undergoing. And a lot of us are feeling right now that there is a wealth shift that's going on. I see it just like, how we talked about the emotional blocks within our system that turn into disease. It's like if people on the planet have trillions of dollars and they're not circulating that energy, it's like cancer on our planet, right? So the plant medicines are getting to those people. Elon Musk is getting activated by ayahuasca. The Silicon Valley is getting activated by microdosing.
Yeah.
All sorts of microdosing of everything.
What are you on right now? What are you on today, man? Well.
And so with that being said, this wealth shift that's happening, and with the support of people who are awakening to their prosperity out of victimhood and into worth, because money is ultimately energy. We're not going to run out of it. Crypto showed us that we can create it like anything else that we can create, but really shifting our consciousness into a place of creation rather than destruction. Yeah. And if we're creating, then where is this money going to go? And how do we, and a big part of the conference, of course, is that when I went down to the Amazon, just like you guys have visited, the activation was that this is about the Amazon. In 2 decades, 40% of the Amazon is going to be gone. In 40 years, the whole thing is going to be gone. For me, I oftentimes go into these spaces and I really feel into our biggest ethnopharmacy is under attack and under threat. Think about that. The most amount of species are in that forest. Some of the largest sacred headwaters are in the Amazon. And so no wonder ayahuasca is reaching out to every single country and every single person that it can activate to say, hey, wake up. There's a turn and a choice and a chance. But if we don't feel that, and then at the same time, I have a very good mentor, Bruce, who's always annihilating my ego. And he's what he says to me is, don't be affected by the outer world in any way. So while holding the mission of we are here to be light, we are here to be love, but be unmoved, emotionally unmoved no matter what happens.
Yeah, totally true.
In this world, but not of it.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's it's interesting, because I know what they have done. They have made huge dents in poverty levels, and that whole thing is shifting. We've made huge progress in that. People are way more likely to die from obesity than they are to die from starvation these days. So we're moving in the right direction for sure. And
obesity.
We are though. There's a really good book called Enlightenment Now by Steven Pinker, and he talks about why there's sort of this fear mindset in our culture. Because actually, if you look at the trends for everything, for violence, for including environmental protection, including inequality of wealth, all these different trends, they're all actually improving. But because media sensationalizes all the negative things, that's all we see is negative. But actually, over time, everything is improving. So it's good to keep that in mind.
It's good to keep the hope and the joy alive no matter
what. We got hope. Don't worry. Everything's going to be fine.
Yeah, for sure.
I have a spiritual teacher I really like. He was commenting on somebody said, well, what do you think about the fact that 83 people control half of the world's wealth? He's like, that's great. I only have to teach 83 people how to meditate and we fix everything.
Yeah, well, It's true, right? I mean, and that's the other thing too. There's a whole phenomenon of dematerialization happening as well. So not only people, especially in the West, who are waking up with these medicines, are requiring less to live. Also, with advances of technology, like how much pieces of equipment does this phone replace? Like, you don't need an alarm clock. You don't need to print books anymore. Potentially, you don't need a stopwatch. You don't need, how many functions is this sort of like a Rolodex? You know what I mean? All these different things that we used to produce in mass quantity are being dematerialized because of technology. So it's like, I think the future's looking good. Except we gotta stay positive with all the negative feedback we get from the media.
Stay in the joy.
Totally.
Create from the joy.
Yeah. But anyway, so integration.
Integration. Okay. So so this year I actually shifted my whole therapeutic I guess modality and alignment. I used to work with individuals with depression and anxiety, relationship issues. Coming out of the program, I went straight into private practice. And then after 3 years, actually with the help and support of Satyen, I shifted completely to working with individuals who have had transformative experiences with psychedelics and entheogens, and needed or wanted to rather bring the lessons into enlightenment, into their awakening, into their path, into their soul mission. So integration, for me, one of the main pieces is inner child work. Hands down. So what happens, and this is a modality called internal family systems, is when you go to ayahuasca shows you your life, gives you a life review. Or you go to Ibogaine, you meet your soul, and your soul shows you your life review. And once you're there and you see what happened to you when you were a child, or in vitro, like before you even got on this planet, what happened to you, and then you see your ancestral lineage, if you can go back into that memory, and you as your adult self, as your higher self, take the child out of that, it's quantum. You're going into, like, you're shifting the timeline. You go back, and you can do this very simply in a meditation. You go back, you take the child out of that scene, integrate the child into your heart. You don't just leave the child somewhere in a garden. You bring the child back into your heart, and from that place, you're not sucked back into that memory anymore. Because a lot of times we're actually working on our past. So when you don't have to go back to your past, guess what happens? You stay in the present. And everything works. Creation also happens from the present.
Right, 100%. Yeah, I
say
had that
1 to 1.
exact experience during my first ayahuasca retreat ever, and it was amazing. I saw my inner child. Like, I saw, like, literally me floating just in front of me, like, actually kind of glowing. It was pretty awesome. And I literally grabbed my inner child and I hugged it, and I just started saying, "Andy, I love you. I love you." I started saying that to my inner child over and over and over. And then that phrase turned into a vibration, which took over my entire state of being, just like bombardment of this vibration, which all I can describe as love energy from the universe, just being pumped into my inner child. And then I just went, whoop, and I just merged it right back into my chest. I was like, oh, that feels good. I'm like, something got healed. And I don't know what it was exactly, but I felt like it was a deep childhood wound of some kind that literally got healed that day. And I made progress. I got better since that day. It's like psychedelics isn't necessarily just for the sick, right? Yes. It's also for the betterment of well people as well. You can actually, like, how good can you get? That's the other thing, right?
Optimal health.
Healthy normals, as the literature calls them. Yeah.
Well, that's where I'm personally really excited, because, like, I mean, we're still, we're in this very interesting stage of the evolution of all this work, from MAPS Canada, just, cannabis legalization. There's so much happening, and we're really still at the beginning of it all. Like, where will we go? Exciting. Potentially, how can we start to combine and really open up the research of different modalities and techniques, plus combine that with spiritual traditions and ceremonies, like I love about going down to where we go at Spirit Quest Sanctuary, how if we do the full 2-week retreat, the first week's dedicated to ayahuasca, then you have a couple-day break, and then you go into work with Wachuma, also known as San Pedro. And the way these medicines were complementary, as well with the other medicines that we do.
Yeah, Mapacho,
Bobandana. Ceremonies within ceremonies kind of thing. Singado, Vilca, which is just incredible and insane all at once. But, like, my goodness, like the potential of all these different combinatory elements that like we're just on the verge of, and we don't even know.
Like, what's the
probably.
best medicine for that individual? Like, what's the medicine for them, right? Because it's not necessarily going to be iboga or ayahuasca or mushrooms or cannabis, but like, what's the right prescription for them? And I think more and more of that's coming.
And letting people follow their path with it too, and having all these options available, like, my goodness, like it's a beautiful, like the potential of where this all is it's going there. Like we're on the path. Like we all feel it.
Definitely.
Like yes, there's going to
The
be
automation
reject and hit side to side that might bump us off, but we're walking it.
We're walking it.
In our collective world, like in our sphere, our bubble, like the stigma has been lifted. I feel like I can talk about it quite openly. I'm sure people in our community do as well. How do you feel like that stigma is in the general population still?
I think it's lifting a little bit. I think there's still definitely stigma. But I think we just need to speak from our truth. Like me starting an iboga business, my mother is a nurse practitioner in Ontario, very, straight-laced kind of conservative medical world. So when I first, with my business partner, rented a house in White Rock to start giving the most powerful psychedelic on earth to people, it was a few months before I told my mother about what I was doing. But then, her first reaction was, Timothy Leary, and then she started looking into it a little bit more. She's a cardiac nurse, so she was worried about the heart issues with iboga, which she discovered. But I introduced her to my nurse. I told her about the ECGs that we do before anybody comes. And and time has passed, but now she's my biggest fan,
Amazing.
And so if my mother's changing her tune, then I think there's hope for everybody.
If you can change and she can change, we can all change.
Exactly.
And I think the other thing is, like, you don't want to get too evangelical about it.
True.
We all go through our evangelical stages for sure. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, these medicines profoundly work to really clear shit out of people.
Right.
Yeah.
And like I've seen I work with iboga, and then I've worked with other people who want to go through other medicine experiences as well. People who have had mushrooms that were going to take it on their own and wanted to do it in a therapeutic way. So I facilitated that kind of thing as well. And, for a 4 to 5 hour journey in a proper context, and we've got the music, we've got the Johns Hopkins psilocybin playlist on Spotify. They've put that on Spotify. Yeah, cool. It's awesome. Wow. Put on a blindfold, go deep into yourself. But, I had one woman come to me because she was a friend of a friend who was really suffering from anxiety, and otherwise, highly functional. She was a chef in a kitchen, but really hadn't slept in about 4 or 5 years because of this anxiety. And she took some medicine. Then I gave her a bit of a booster dose a bit later, and then she just lied still for 4 hours and didn't budge at all. And then she popped out, and she's like, I haven't rested like that in about 10 years. And the next words out of her mouth is, why isn't everybody doing this?
That's a very common phrase that I hear, even from myself after these experiences. I'm like, it should be available to more people.
Yeah.
Like, it just really should. At risk of being the Tim Lear of Canada and having Trudeau being like, Andy is the most dangerous man in Canada. But, I mean, honestly, it's like...
At least we're doing it together, and I feel like the plant, especially cannabis, is like so much the medicine of mobilization. Mm-hmm. And so, like Trev was saying, all we can do is just speak from our hearts and our truth.
Yeah.
And then the research is catching up, right? Like, this is like a super shout out to MAPS Canada, to the Beckley Foundation, to the people at Johns Hopkins,
all of them,
to all the elders and all the ceremonial
Imperial
College, all the ceremonial facilitators who keep going back into their own darkness to be able to hold support for people right now. Like, this is big work, and so I feel that this stigma will lift off when people experience their own family suffering. Like, it wasn't until my mom, I lost my aunt to cancer on 4/20 last year, and it wasn't until that happened, that ripple happened in my own family, that my mom started. She's always been such a huge support of me, but it wasn't until that happened where she was like, the oil, cannabis oil, what else can it do?
Mm-hmm.
And so if someone else in our family, God forbid, goes through that, there's an openness. And I think that's where people are. And I just want to add too that there are 2 speakers that are coming to the conference that are really going to, speaking of stigma, shift this, because when people relate to other human beings and they've gone through the plant medicines, like people might look at me and be like, oh, well, I can't really, she's a little bit out there, you know, or look at Trev and be like, you know, who would go to the downtown east side, or look at you guys and be like, who would start a float business and like activate people in this kind of way, right? We're kind of like on the edge a little bit. But so one of the speakers, she's actually the youngest speaker to be at on panel with her mom. She is 5 years old, and little baby Cheyenne, now she's not a baby anymore, but before the age of 2, she had to go through 6 rounds of chemo. So her mom actually said no. She said, I don't want to do this anymore to my child. My child is withering away. And you guys have children, so you know, right? She's like, I don't want to do this anymore to my child. The chemo is killing my child. And I didn't know this in Canada. After I talked to her, I found out the nurses and the doctors actually threatened to take the child away because you can't say no
to a medical doctor
when they're saying that.
Yeah.
So you know.
Well, I mean,
it's complicated.
I think that's a complicated question to unpack for sure, but it's like, wow, tough.
Yeah. So she went to every door to be able to receive this medicine, and she got connected to Corey Yelland, who is, again, Corey, thank you so much. She's helped over 1,000 people with cancer.
Wow.
She'll be at the conference as well. And so when you ask, it's given, and then you connect to the right person. And another person is Doug Bench, who's like a judge from now he's in Florida, but he actually put 300 people in jail because of cannabis, and then he got lung cancer.
I heard about him.
Right, and his wife is like, I'm gonna leave you if you don't use this oil. And he said, well, you better get that illegal substance out of my house. Right? And she's like, she threatened him. She's like, I'm gonna leave. And so this is the feminine, the mother coming in and being like,
take your medicine, boy.
Take your medicine, boy. And you know, women are so nurturing that way. They want the health of their family.
Even if it's tough love sometimes.
Tough love, yeah.
Right?
So he's a huge advocate.
Amazing.
Wow.
And he's from
Crazy.
It's stories like that.
Judiciary side.
Stories like that, which is so when you hear them, you're like, wow, like, you know, I think that's one way to really destigmatize these conversations. Also, I'd say like people like Michael Pollan coming out and writing his book, How to Change a Mind, like having like really well-respected people and authors that come at it from that angle. I'd say like sources of media like podcasts might be a really good one because there's all sorts of alternative media now which has given these things a voice as well. Like look at like Joe Rogan, like he's one of the biggest.
Intellectual dark web,
the intellectual dark, the scary people that talk about things you shouldn't talk about.
Long conversations with each other, not just sound bites.
Yeah, exactly.
So
but I mean,
it's
like
critical though.
Yeah, but like
for that evolution, right?
But I mean, like I think he's very important because I think he's not afraid to speak about these things, which he does at length. And
Joe Rogan taught more people about Iboga and Ibogaine than anybody. I think I've had more people come to me because they heard about Ibogaine through Joe Rogan than anything else.
Yeah. And float tanks for sure.
The exact same thing.
Probably. Yeah. I know it's funny too because we were at Spirit Quest and Aubrey Marcus from On It was down there with me when I was there, and he like when you go to Spirit Quest and there'll be like 30 people there. And like probably 60 to 70% of them are going to say, "Oh, I heard about it through Aubrey Marcus, who was on the Rogan podcast." And it's like these alternative sources of media are giving a voice because we're allowed to talk about whatever we want. We don't have a corporation breathing down our neck saying what we can and can't talk about or regulations and that. We can just share the information freely. And I think all these things are sort of coming together. And I honestly I do feel like people's minds are changing. Like, look, I mean, if the FDA, I mean, you would have thought from what you see on social media posts that the FDA would have never let MDMA therapy go through, but
and
there it is.
Labeling it as breakthrough, not even as breakthrough therapy.
Well,
huge news.
Rick Doblin of MAPS, he says, there people within these bureaucracies now have had impactful and healing experience from these plant medicines, even if it happened at a rave. You know?
So then I think we have a call to action. Maybe again at risk of being the most dangerous man in Canada. come out of the psychedelic closet.
Yes,
Totally.
This is the great coming out, and I have to give a shout out to our sponsors this year at the Cannabis Hemp Conference, because again, without the support of the money, without the circulation of money, these events couldn't happen. MAPS wouldn't be able to do their amazing research without the generous donation of individuals. So I just want to give a shout out to Agrima, our top title sponsor, and Reed Parr, who's co-founder of, he's like a medicine brother as well. And so when people in these places who have a lot of money get activated, they want to give.
Yeah.
Because what else are you gonna what else are you gonna do with your life on this planet? You know, other than give.
We're seeing it. You know, even when you see things like you know, executives from like to be hired at for like Google, for example, have to go to Burning Man as like part of their interview process. So we're seeing more and more of that stuff coming through, which is incredible. I think.
Very cool. Well, I think we should probably wrap this up, but I want to make sure that everyone who's still with us can easily find tickets and you know, can you kind of give us the lowdown on all that kind of stuff, Salimeh?
Yeah, for sure. So go to the website, cannabishempconference.com, and you'll be able to see a whole schedule for Friday and Saturday. There's going to be talks from legalization to cannabis patient stories with specifically with cancer. Of course, I mentioned the microdosing with psilocybin. Trevor's going to be on panel with Iboga. There's going to be an actual individual who's gone through the Iboga therapy with Trev. We have incredible speakers, especially in regards to product creation with cannabis, what's happening in the licensed producer space, how can you get involved because the licensed producers are now opening up their doors, what's happening on the clinical realm with cannabis, the latest research and updates. And so you know, tickets are on sale now. You can use the code VITALITY to receive 20% off.
Awesome.
And this is a gathering force because when we come together, look, the four of us sitting together, look how activated the space became. And so imagine, you know, 600, 700 people coming together and speaking their truth and connecting. It's like the mycelium network, you know, we're definitely connecting that way.
Speaking of mycelium, you said I could plug these conferences in Toronto.
Yes.
I'm speaking at the Mapping the Mind with Mushrooms conference, September 22nd.
Sounds cool.
University of Toronto, the Canadian Students for Sensible Drug Policy is putting that on. I think it's the 5th annual. Mark Hayden, the executive director of MAPS Canada, and I will be there.
Awesome.
And there's a VIP dinner fundraiser afterwards for MAPS Canada as well. Great. And then I just found out that I'm going to speak at an event the night before as well, which is on psychedelics and spirituality. I don't have details there yet, but can share to my
Okay.
Amazing.
And then
how can they reach out to you individually?
I'm through libertyroot.net.
And you can connect with me through the conference email or through my own personal website, vibrantsoulcounseling.com. And the dates of the conference, Trev's going to be in Toronto right before for the 2 activations, but the dates for the Cannabis Hemp Conference are September 28th, 29th, and 30th. And if you want more information, just go to the website and check out the 6 workshops, live workshops on Sunday at the Nest, including cannabis topicals, CBD for pets, so not just for humans.
And that meditation.
Wonderful.
And the ceremony on
Do
Saturday.
the meditation.
Very
Go
beautiful.
do that. You won't regret it.
Yep.
Guaranteed.
Amazing.
Well, yeah.
Awesome.
Not easy, but it'll be good.
Well, formally, thank you both for coming on the show.
Thank you, guys. That was great.
So
Fun
much.
to talk about where we're going and this path that we're all on. And thank you for all joining us wherever you may be listening or watching. Without you, we wouldn't be here. We wouldn't be doing this. So thank you for your support. Like, comment, share if this resonates with you on any level. We would really appreciate that.
Coming for a Float help support as well.
Oh, Floathouse. If you want to support us, come check out Floathouse, Floathouse.ca. Use the code Vancouver Real, or come and just float and then maybe get on the membership, because that's the most economical way to make this practice really work for you. And that's also where the power of floating is unleashed as well. So check that out.
Unleash the power.
Microdose and float.
Oh, yes. Yeah. Well, you know.
We didn't say that.
I did. Just a shout out to you guys. Thank you for your leadership as well, to both of you. Yeah, really
Appreciate
holding
it.
it down. Divine Masculine.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. You know what? I had a book idea called The Divine Masculine. Yeah.
Do it.
That's a little sign there, a little poke.
It's been brooding.
Oh,
yeah.
okay.
So we'll see. Maybe. It's a tall order. But anyways.
Anything for you, Andy?
Can't wait.
AndysRumba.com, mindfulmass.org, mantalks.com, vancouverreal.tv. Those are all the websites. That's everything.
Awesome.
Until next time.
To whatever is.
To whatever is.
You gonna try to click it?
Oh yeah, I'll click it.
Yep.